Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode here at Bulletproof Selling. As always, I am Sean Rhodes, Chief Sales Sergeant here at Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. Now, here at Bulletproof Selling, our motto, our mission is to ensure that hope is not a sales strategy. And so we are here every week, multiple times a week, to make sure that you can improve the performance of your salespeople, their pipelines, and the results that your teams are getting for you in the field of sales. So in this weekly Bulletproof Selling series, we have the distinct pleasure and honor of interviewing some of the top minds in sales today, from best-selling authors to Hall of Fame speakers, consultants, trainers, and those that are out there in the field building teams, building sales brands of their own. So these folks are on the front lines selling or building the teams that sell to make sure that we can bring to you the latest and the greatest on what's working in the field of sales, and especially the sales systems that attribute so much to the success of any sales team. Now, my commitment to you is every one of these episodes, we are going to create a sales system that you can use no matter the size of your goals or the size of your team. And we've covered everything just, in the last year, in fact, with this podcast and with this live stream, from how do you develop leads, how do you find them, to how do you pursue them, to how do you get them into conversation, to how do you close them and then generate predictable referrals on the tail end. If there's a part of the sales process that we haven't covered yet, well, we try to actually dive into that this week, which is why I'm very excited to bring on this week's guest. Now, in the field of franchise, you cannot succeed without systems, because you think about that business model, you're turning over an entire business to someone that might not have ever sold what it is you're trying to sell or done what it is that service is that you're trying to provide to your customers. So if that franchisor cannot bring systems to bear, they have to learn everything the hard way. And like most businesses, the failure rate is going to be pretty high. Well, the guest that I have today has actually been in charge throughout her career of standing up entire sales platforms and systems inside of brands. And that's why it is my distinct pleasure today to welcome to the show Sharon Cupach. Now, did I mispronounce your name there? Because that's something I didn't check.
Thank you so much. And most people do. It's
Okay.
Cupach.
Cupach. Okay, awesome. Well, Sharon, it is a pleasure to have you on the show today. And we have a little bit to cover, all right? We had a great pre-show conversation about all the great things that you've been doing throughout your career. So I would love for you to start off with telling our audience a little bit about yourself, your current role, and then let's dive into the actual work that you do with franchise companies across the country throughout your career to help them establish sales systems from the ground up.
Okay. Thank you so much, first of all, for having me. I am Senior Director of Happinest Franchise Development. We have 3 brands underneath us: Lawn Doctor, Legacy brand, Mosquito Hunters, Pest Control, and most recent EcoMaids, which is an entirely green cleaning concept. My role is primarily with EcoMaids at this point, lifting the brand, bringing in the right foundation of owners, working with a sales professional alongside of me to help drive that activity. But I've been in franchising for, now over 25 years, almost 26 years. So I think back and I think, how did I ever luck out to fall into this space? Because it's the most amazing day-to-day opportunity to change people's lives and really build something that's bigger than myself and be compensated accordingly for it. So I've worked with all different types of brands: brick and mortars, home services, consulting. I had my own consulting company for several years, outsourcing development for new brands, senior brands. So I've sort of run the gamut. I will tell you, my sweet spot where I get the most pleasure is working with a new brand and lifting that brand and really developing the infrastructure on the sales side, the marketing for the sales side, and then bringing in that strong foundation of owners to really get it lifted off the ground. So that's where I see, after 25 years, that I like to spend my time. And it's just been a fun ride.
Now, for so many people watching and listening to this show, they're part of existing teams, but there's also a huge segment of our audience that are trying to figure out how to scale out their own team. Because I'm sure you've noticed the business is a booming. Small businesses are being stood up at a rate probably greater than they ever have before, which means these folks, as soon as they get to the point where they realize me as the CEO and chief bottle washer of this entire company, I can't be selling all the time. I actually have to deliver what it is that I sell, or I've got to supervise the operations team that does that. I've got to start hiring salespeople. But then a major challenge begins to come in because they've got all of that sales knowledge in their head. They're the ones that have been on every sales call, every sales meeting. They've faced every objection that that they ran into over the course of their building of their business. Now they got to transfer all that to someone and hope that they get them ramped up and successful as quickly as possible. So I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the first things that you notice have to happen if you're going into a company and they've hired you? They said, Sharon, we need a sales process here. I kind of know what I'm doing because we're profitable, but I need to hire people to do this for me. What are some things that you need to make sure are done first, second, and third in getting that thing stood up?
That's a great question. And that does happen quite a bit actually in franchising. And I've been in that circumstance multiple times. The first thing I do is take a look at what do they have. I want to analyze exactly how they're going about it today and then elevate that into really appropriate steps in order to be able to duplicate. Franchising is all about duplication of business, right? Sales process is a duplication of efforts and systems and content, right? So first thing I do is take a look at what they have. And then I take a step back and I really think about that and think about what do I want to keep and what do I want to gently remove from the process that's probably not getting them to where they really want to be.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you walk into a situation as such, most of the time it's the owner of if in my case of the franchise. So they're the franchisor, super emotional.
Yeah.
Micromanagement is a big play there. Hard to let go of stuff, but they know they need to. So consulting on that side is, look, I have a great track record. Trust me a little bit. You brought me in here for a reason. Let's walk through this. I'll concede in areas you concede. So take a look at the process, take a step back, think about it, and then start weaning out what works and what doesn't work based on typical franchising 101 qualities. Setting up a CRM, setting up drip campaigns to be able to communicate when I don't have time to communicate. Always touch points with candidates. Making sure that it's a purposeful process for the candidate, frankly, more so for the candidate than the franchisor, making sure that they are getting what they need in order to get to the point to be able to make a good decision. So that encompasses a lot, whether it's just content, whether it's conversation, whether it's speaking to executives on the franchisor team, whether it's talking to other business owners in the industry, doing some ghost shopping, whatever that looks like, depending on the brand, making sure they get enough in order to be able to make a really good decision. And then making sure that process is buttoned down, because then I'm going to have to take that process and I'm going to have to duplicate it with everybody that works with me.
Yeah.
Which is a whole nother thing.
Whole other thing. And it's something that you mentioned. I mean, every step actually along the way that you stated you need to do for a franchisor to stand up their sales brand, to sell to other people, to get into the franchise, same process applies to a salesperson just selling a singular customer. So same thing you do for your franchisors, they could do with their end user clients as well, the folks that aren't necessarily buying the business, but that are benefiting from the products or services that business provides. So I know that you had mentioned a little bit of shift that you saw happen when the pandemic hit. Tell me a little bit about how that affected the way that you train your teams, the way that you stand up these sales models inside of organizations, and of course, how much more difficult that might have caused you to have with finding new salespeople, because I know the market is really hurting for good folks right now too. So I'd love to hear about how the pandemic kind of shifted the way that you do things.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great topic. And actually it shifted for us. Obviously, I've never been through a pandemic in all of my years. So
yeah,
it was all new and different, and it happened super quick in March of 2020, right? And immediately we had to pivot pretty much everything. How we presented to candidates, not doing face-to-face discovery days where they get to meet the team. We had to go virtual. We had to start selling more on a virtual level. That's that a candidate could receive the information correctly. I really don't believe that we utilize Zoom or platforms like that on any intense level prior to COVID.
Yeah.
So just learning how to talk to a camera, how to connect. What do you do when the internet is awful? How do you, do you show your face? Do you not show like all of those little things to build that relationship and make
Yeah.
sure that you are presenting yourself and your brand in a professional, positive way? It all matters. Every little thing matters when you have that interaction. So what we saw in our underneath Happinest, which is my experience with COVID, was an increase in activity, which was really kind of mind blowing to us. We had found, and on our candidates, many of them had been downsized and they were C-level candidates. And they were like, all right, that's it. I'm going to get into a business. This is my opportunity. So we got this flood. And then how do you deal with that on the sales side when internally? And that was where we really were able to do something very positive and take a step back and look at our content and tailor it towards a different level candidate. What more are we going to share with them that we might have shared in person at one point, or maybe we wouldn't have even had this opportunity? So how do we take advantage of it and really make sure they're getting what they need from it? And then streamlining that, as they, in our case, as our teams, our sales teams and our candidates would collide together at the end of the process in a really great discovery day, which is an all-day event. You have to make sure that everybody's showing up. So you have, it's not just me and a candidate or my sales rep and a candidate. It is 12 other people on the corporate level that are engaging throughout the day. And you have to make sure that you can pull that off, right? And be effective. So there was a lot of practice that went into that, actually. A lot of, let's try this again. I think we're pretty darn good at it. It took us a couple times to get really comfortable. So I believe that the way that we communicate and really trying to build a relationship virtually versus physically alters how you speak, what you share, your body language. Pre-COVID, a lot was done on the phone with sales, and then you have the grand event, which isn't face-to-face. So they didn't see you. We didn't use Zoom or anything we just talked on the phone. Now, most of my day is on Zoom, which is fun and exhausting all at the same time. Right. And I'm sure you're on camera a lot. So it does get a little tiresome and you get Zoom fatigue for sure. And you got to remember that you can't. You have to put your best face forward and act like that's the very first time you're on camera. Yeah.
And I love what you mentioned about the dry runs that you have to do to get this process right. A well done sales call, whether it's just one salesperson and one prospect, or a whole team in that prospect, if it's done well, it's like a well orchestrated symphony. Everybody's got their role. They step in at the right time. You've practiced a couple of things that might go wrong, possible objections, who's going to handle those, instead of everybody hopping in at once to try to solve it. It can be done well and it can be done poorly. So I'd love to hear about your experience in helping organizations stand up new sales teams, because some organizations are standing them up for the first time, like they don't have a sales team. Right. And some of them have to stand up a new sales team because they're expanding into a new market, where they've got a new product or service out there and they need to segment a whole new batch of customers. So I think what we're going to learn today from you would apply to both of those cases. And of course, if you're an individual salesperson and you've just been given a new territory, you're expanding. Congratulations. So same processes are going to apply, I have a feeling, from what we're about to learn. So as you've coached CEOs and these folks that have the title of sales executive officer throughout your career, and they're standing up a new team, where do you see them relying on hope a little more than they should in that process? I mean, obviously they're hiring you to come in and give them some certainty, but where are they relying on hope a little much that when you get in there, you have to help educate them that maybe hope is not the best strategy right there?
Yeah, that has happened so many times in my career. I think just speaking from my experience in the industry of franchising that I'm in, which you can definitely translate into any sales environment. A lot of people go with family and friends in the beginning, right? You can get them a little cheaper or free, and their personality. And I'm not a big proponent of that out of the gate. I know it's financially, it makes a lot of sense when you're first starting because you can mitigate your costs there. However, many times those are not the right people to effectively represent and articulate your message out into the community. Your sales rep is your brand, right? They're promoting the ultimate brand, but they truly are the face. They are the relationship. We buy from people, right? We don't buy from companies. And
Right.
so you have to make sure that that person is going to stand up and represent for your brand. So that I've noticed that happen quite a bit. And I think it's a default in my industry, certainly. And what I've coached them on is, look, that person can make or break that area of your business, literally. In our industry, you don't have a good salesperson. You have somebody that's inappropriate at a convention or says something to a client that just sits really poorly on, right? Does something that doesn't follow through with commitments of promises to give information or data or whatever it is. That will resonate poorly on your brand, and that will hurt you. It will hurt
Absolutely.
you.
And you mentioned something there. I'm going to try to encapsulate it all inside of one word, and tell me if I'm on or off base here. The most important thing for a organization standing up a new sales team or a new territory, one is the salesperson, and the specific behavior we're looking for out of that salesperson is, above all, integrity. Would you say that's accurate?
I would say that's 100% accurate.
We're going to have a lot of fun today, Sharon, because this is a topic that we've never really dove into before, because it's such a soft skill, integrity in salespeople. We assume as adults that if I say I'm going to do something, that I will fulfill that commitment, or I will rearrange my priorities and schedule if I can't fulfill it to get you on track at a later date. If I say I'm going to be in a meeting with you at 10 a.m. For a sales chat, we're going to be there, or I'm going to be calling you and doing everything I can to say, hey, can't make it, we need to reschedule. That you would assume is like the standard of entry, but you and I both know in the field of sales, that's actually the exception to the rule. So I would love to work with you today to develop a sales system on how to ensure that we systemize integrity, because integrity could apply to any aspect of the sales cycle, from how I find and source leads, because you could be out of integrity with how you do that, all the way to, at the tail end of it, finding referrals from a very satisfied customer. There are ways to do that well, and there are ways to do that where you become out of integrity with yourself as well. So let's develop this system. Now, when we talk about systems here at Bulletproof Selling, we talk about trimming hope away from a sales strategy. And we've developed dozens of systems so far, but never one on integrity. So I'm excited to see where we take this one. Well, the TRIM acronym is the thing that we use to build the sales system. T in TRIM is the triggering element. Now, if I'm a salesperson out there in the field, whether I'm brand new or I'm a veteran of 25 years, I want to make sure that any commitment that I make, I'm in integrity with it, that I fulfill it, or I do my best to rearrange that so that someone knows we can't do it on the original timeline, but here's the new timeline. Is that okay with you? Can we compromise on that? So what's the trigger element for integrity? Is it before I'm on the phone with a prospect? Is it as I'm making a commitment to a prospect? Either, and again, not just on the phone, right? We could do this email, because I make commitments all the time on email. I'm sure you do as well. We got to fulfill those too, right? So it's any mode of communication. When do you think I need to really trigger a sales system to make sure I remain in integrity, that I fulfill my commitments? Does it happen as I'm planning all the commitments I can make? Is it with a prospect, either facing them or in an email? Where do you recommend we start with this?
Such a great question. Sean, I think integrity is in you or not in you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you learn integrity. I think you have it or you don't. But if we want to make a system that tracks and is accountable for integrity based activities, then I think when you're hiring somebody that you feel really comfortable has that base of integrity out of the gate. And you should be able to find that in a person or not as you speak with them. So let's assume that they do have a level of integrity. And then you have to put that system in place. And for me, if I had to do that, which I've never really had to do, frankly. So for me, I think I would put checkpoints. I would say, you know, you have to respond and finish your activity within X amount of time. If I've got to babysit that much, that's how deep.
Right, and then you got a problem, right?
Yeah. That's where I'm kind of stuttering, thinking, when have I? Anytime I've had a employee that has not had that level of integrity, they didn't last very long. They just sort of naturally exited because that's not acceptable.
So there's definitely a baseline level of integrity. You know, I'm going to fulfill my basic commitment, show up when I say I'm going to show up. But as salespeople, especially as we began to expand our pipeline and our prospect base, we may have 50 or 100 or 1,000 floating commitments out there. I tell you, I'm going to be in touch in June of 2023. There's a lot of things that happen between now and June, but if I'm going to remain in integrity with that commitment, I've got to have some way to track that, hold myself accountable, and get that back in front of me, because I don't expect to remember a commitment that I made a year ago, you know, that was singular to one person I had one conversation with. And so I believe that what we're talking about here is not just the basic level of integrity that makes you employable, but how do we make sure that we're going above and beyond with our integrity so that we are known across 1,000 prospects as the person that always fulfills their commitments. So I love the idea that you had about making a checklist. Now, in my world, checklists are the things that we live and die by. As I was following combat troops around the world, checklists were exactly how they kept order to a very chaotic world. And so I think it's a great idea for a salesperson, as you begin to make commitments, begin to track the areas that those commitments are occurring in. Is it future outreach? Is it, I promise you I'm going to respond immediately with an email that's going to have that document you requested? Begin to track those, and to make those commitments easier to deliver. If you are sending the same PDF, you know, 100 times a week, why not have that thing more easily accessible or loaded up in a template email that you can just then customize and get out the door quickly, right? So there's a lot of great ways that we could trigger this integrity loop. But I think, like you said, it comes down to knowing what are the commitments we're making most often. Now, the R in TRIM is making this thing repeatable. And so if I'm making 1,000 commitments over the course of a year, high-level commitments, outreach in the future. Yes, I'm going to send you this. We're going to get that pricing sheet over. We're setting up an appointment to meet with the executive board in 2 weeks. What are the things I need to do in a predictable order to make that a reality, to make sure I'm delivering on my commitments? And the last step in that's probably going to be to hold myself accountable, to have some kind of a backup check. But I'm curious to know from you, if you're training a salesperson up in this type of a thing, they're making a lot of commitments. What are the things you recommend they do in what order to ensure that they're delivering on what they say they're going to do?
That's great. That's a great question. I am a big proponent of the list and my calendar. And I start my day. I already know, because I've reviewed at the end of the previous day what needs to happen for tomorrow and the remainder of the week. I'm always tomorrow and the remainder of the week. I never just look at tomorrow. I try to see, can I move things around? Can I, you know, is there something I can like accomplish right this minute and take it off of Friday? I'm going to do that, right? So I always look at the end of the day and set myself up so I can sleep at night. Otherwise, I wake up in the middle of the night and it doesn't work out so well.
Right.
Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, I forgot to do this.
Yep.
So, and then in the morning, I do the same thing. And this is how I train my sales folks, is get up in the morning, do your morning thing, go work out, have your coffee, you know, play with your kid, whatever you're doing. But take a moment to look at your day, like breathe through your day and see what's expected of you. And if they've been appropriate in documenting everything that they've committed to, all of their tasks, their phone calls, their strategy hours, we block times for strategy. We get together on a regular to discuss upcoming strategy or issues or whatever. I want them to be completely in control of their day as much as possible. There's going to be things that happen that take you out of that control. But if you know what's on your plate, for me at least, and my team, then we know we can get that accomplished. And if we can't, we can be appropriate and let the person know that, hey, I need an extra day, or
Right.
this didn't happen today, I'm going to need a week, or whatever that is. When I do a conversation with someone that, hey, let's meet 6 months from now, I'm a tickler on my calendar. Hey,
Sure.
hook up with Sean on this date. Okay, I'm going to mark you on this date. Is that good? Sure, that's great. And then I don't have to think about it until I look at what's going on next week and then what's going on tomorrow through the end of the week. And I don't have to really think about it. It's out of my head. So that's how I work with my sales teams to make sure that they are following through with commitment. I'm also old school in some cases, and I keep a lot of Post-it notes.
Okay.
I'm a Post-it note girl all over.
The important thing is that the system works for you. And I absolutely love the idea of taking time each day to look at what are the commitments I've made today. And this is, getting very much back into like the Stephen Covey, first things first model. What is urgent and important of all the commitments that I've made, and to knock them out in that order rather than, I put 18 things on my calendar today. I'm just going to start going through the checklist, only to realize item 15 was really the biggest thing. And it's now 4:45 and that person's already out of the office and I can't get a hold of them. That could create problems. So I love this repeatable system that we have now. Now the I in trim is making it improvable. So this is a little different than measuring it. That's the M. We're going to get to that in a minute. But I'm curious to know from you, if you set a sales team up, they're rocking and rolling on all 8 cylinders, they're going down the road doing good things, but they ask you to come back and they say, Sharon, we're interested to know how much in integrity are we with all the commitments that we've made? What would you advise them to look at or do to actually improve their level of integrity to the people they're making those commitments to?
So for me, improvement is a work in progress and is always happening. That is not something that I don't believe in just sitting still with any activity or any process or any system. And integrity is part of that, because we can always do better. None of us are perfect. We can always do better. We will always forget something. That we're human, right? And we apologize and we make it right and we move on, and it wasn't on purpose, right? So for me, when we have these conversations, it's a lot about, can you streamline? Can you manage your time better? Can you flip your list? It's just really basic stuff, Sean, to be honest with you, and sort of just common sense. You have these activities. Can we automate them? Can we automate more of those activities? We've done that on an ongoing basis here at Happiness, where we've added, weekly we add templates into our CRM so that we don't have to manually do that function. We hit a button and it's good to go, and we don't have to think about that happens all the time in my world. But it is checking yourself and finding, what may work for me, the list. And I do prioritize my tasks. I have a sales rep that looks at a book. That's her thing. And hey, whatever works for your team is awesome, as long as it's getting done. So, you kind of find your own way and see what works for you. But it should be an ongoing work in progress, and then automating as much as you possibly can.
I love the idea of automating. I'm same as you. I've got, 100 email templates loaded up into my CRM. And for companies that hire me to come in and do what I do for them, that's the first thing we do, is begin to capture what's working, what's not in the way of actual automation. So would love to know from you then on the M part of trim, measuring. What are we measuring quarter over quarter or year over year to see, are we in integrity with our customers? Is it their feedback? You guys always deliver on what you say? Is it something more business related, closed deals, gross revenue? How am I tracking this with hard metrics, objective metrics over the course of whatever amount of time to know that I'm staying in integrity and improving the way that I stay in integrity?
Well, I think you spilled my candy for me. So first of all, integrity in franchising in our industry is everything. Everything. You only stay in franchising if you have high integrity. People leave all the time because they don't. And people won't do business with you if you don't have high integrity. So if I'm seeing that we're not getting referrals, in the, in the amount of referrals with one relationship, all of a sudden they stop. There's a problem there. Let's figure
Yeah.
out what happened. I'll make it right. I'll make that commitment personally, and let's get that back on track. So absolutely feedback. And we ask for that from our relationships all the time, not only from our clients and customers, but also our relationships. And then secondly, it is a hardcore data deals done. How many leads are we getting? How many people are filling out what we call a profile? And then this is from the customer perspective. And then how do we get them? How many have we gotten closed? That they're not going to buy a business from me if I haven't done what I've committed to do, because it's a relationship. It's always a relationship. I remember back, this is a personal, my daughter years ago, and she became like the #1 T-Mobile sales rep in the whole United States.
Wow.
So like she really rocked it. But when she first started her very first job with T-Mobile years ago, she said, "Mom, I am so afraid to sell. Like I'm petrified of it." And I said, all you have to do is know what you're talking about. You got to know your product. You got to know, and you have to keep your commitments. You're don't think of it as selling. Think of it as sharing and educating, and you will do very well. And so I think a lot of what we need to focus on in sales is just mind space, making sure that we're in the right frame of mind to be able to communicate in a professional but personable way what we're trying to get across, the information we're trying to get across. And that feeds directly into integrity, right? If you don't have integrity, you're not going to do that, period.
Absolutely.
So,
I love it. So we've got that, the whole sales system set for how do you create, systemize, improve, and measure integrity in a sales team. That's something that I think any salesperson in the world could use, especially in the world of franchise. So Sharon, talk to us a little bit about how we get in touch with you, the brands that you're part of. If somebody's listening to you and they say, that's the woman I want to go work for next time you're standing up a sales team, Sharon, I'm your salesperson. How do they get in touch with you and follow what you're doing?
Well, thank you. So one, you can reach out to me via phone, 216-235-9246, or you can go on to and send me an email, and it's just my first last name at ecomaids.com. I would be more than happy to have a conversation, help anybody I could.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. And for those of you that are watching Bulletproof Selling regularly, make sure that you're following us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube for these live streams. Make sure you're leaving us those reviews over on iTunes. It really helps get the message out that hope is not a sales strategy. And of course, if you're interested in finding where those podcasts live, they are on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere the podcast can be found. And for more sales systems to help you replace hope with certainty, make sure you're checking out the free resources that we are posting up every single week over at bulletproof-selling.com. Well, Shawn Rhodes here. It's been a pleasure serving the sales community alongside you, Sharon. Let's get out there and make selling bulletproof.